and I'm happy to chat with a really great guest. And so I'm just going to go ahead and kick it off.
I'm very excited.
Yeah, I'm very excited. We're both excited. We've been waiting for this, and so we're really pleased and honored to have Mr. Ahmad Massoud. He is the leader of the National Resistance Front of Afghanistan. Mr. Massoud is the son of the late anti-Soviet and revolutionary commander Ahmad Shah Massoud, and was born in July 1989 in a beautiful province of Afghanistan, if I may say so, Takhar. And he also attended war studies from King's College in London, which is very impressive. I wish I had done that. And he also was the CEO of the Massoud Foundation prior to the fall of the Afghan government. Mr. Massoud, it is an honor for me and Bill to have you on our show. We are both admirers of your father, and we are really delighted to have you on Generation Jihad.
Thank you very much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure and honor to be here. And I wish you guys and also all the listeners and the viewers all the best. And I'm glad to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
No, the pleasure is ours, Mr. Massoud. Again, thank you for joining us. And,
thank you.
Look, I'm an admirer, obviously, of your father. Al-Qaeda killed him 2 days before the attack on 9/11. It was no accident. They they attempted to remove a very influential and powerful figure because they knew the United States was coming. The United States owes a lot to him. The Afghan people do too. And we look forward to hearing about what you are doing in Afghanistan today.
Sure.
I am. So we'll kick it off. For our listeners, Mr. Massoud, can you just kind of explain the National Resistance Front, just what you guys are doing and what your goals and visions are?
Sure. It's very simple in terms of military aspect. It is the continuation of war on terror. The war on terror ended for the West, but it never ended for us because terrorism did not leave us, and the terrorism exists. The terrorism is growing and becoming stronger and becoming more dangerous. And every day that passes, and they are becoming more extreme, and the draconian rule is expanding. And the latest, this horrific ruling and horrific situation in Afghanistan, I'm sure you heard that. And the latest decree by the leader of the Taliban, he announced that the women are no longer able or allowed to study medicine. So you're seeing in what sort of age we are living and what sort of enemy we are facing. And this, in the face of such enemy, we have no choice but to continue this war, to continue this freedom fighting. Why? For freedom. For establishing a democratic government in Afghanistan that represents the people of Afghanistan, which is recognized by the world, and also for us to have a dignified life. That's as simple as that. Unfortunately, with this group and with the Taliban and terrorists, Afghans, they lost their dignity, they lost their honor, they lost everything. We just want to restore that.
Well, thank you. I know that your group, the National Resistance Front, is the largest, the most active on the battlefield. And when did you start the National Resistance Front, and when did you begin operations?
Right after the withdrawal from Afghanistan on 15th of August, we had two choices. Either to leave Afghanistan and go to the West, or to stay and fight for what we have preached to the people for almost 20 years. As part of the Massoud Foundation, and as part of many other sort of area of activity that I used to do before the collapse, I was also to some extent a politician. So I preached to my people a lot about freedom, democracy, women's right, human right, freedom of speech, and also how bad Taliban are and how good democracy is. So I felt really empty on the 15th of August, that we felt to some extent betrayed, actually.
Yes.
That the democracy left us all alone. And I could not leave my people all alone, especially when I told them for years of how good democracy is, how good, living like human being, it's good, and how bad Taliban are. So we stayed in Kabul, and then I moved to Panjshir, which was the only province at that time not under the control of Taliban. And over there, we tried to make one last call for peace, which Taliban refused. And that's when we went operational, and we started the National Resistance Front. I called upon the people for an uprising, which happened across Afghanistan and even across different cities outside Afghanistan and different countries. And that's how the National Resistance Front was born.
Yeah. Bill, do you have a question?
Yes. Mr. Massoud, what does the National Resistance Front and other resistance groups need in order to mount a successful campaign against the Taliban, and not just the Taliban, but their allies such as Al-Qaeda, the movement of Taliban in Pakistan, and other terror groups that are operating there?
Well, what we need is actually very simple. In the past 3 years, at the beginning, Bill, I was very skeptical of our success. I was like, is it possible to actually defeat a group which fought for 20 years against United States, against a government with 300,000 forces? Is it possible to fight against such sort of hardliners and extreme people? I was skeptical. But today, after 3 years of fighting with them, with empty hands, with no support whatsoever, politically or militarily or financially, Bill, I'm 100% right now confident they are very much capable of being defeated. They're very much able to be defeated militarily and politically. So what do we need? We need the world to recognize the Taliban as a terror group, first and foremost. So we need to put some of these bricks of the foundation. They have every characteristic of what the ISIS does. They do exactly the same thing. They have done exactly the same crime. So they are a terror group. Second, what we need, the world needs to recognize the democratic force of Afghanistan. I'm not asking them to recognize me or the NRF, but democratic force of Afghanistan. The women of Afghanistan, the men of Afghanistan who are actually speaking of establishing and installing a democratic government in Afghanistan based on the voting of the people. And lastly, we do not need men on the ground. We do not need boots on the ground. We are enough to fight our own war. We just need support. A fraction of what was invested in the past 20 years. A fraction of the equipment. Why? Because we possess enough people to fight and enough courage to continue this war and enough determination to actually topple the Taliban. Why? Because in the past 3 years, we now know exactly how they operate, who they are, what they do, and the people also understood them. So right now, actually, the issue that I have, it is I have too many people that their hands are on my chest and they're asking me to give them ammunition and equipment to topple the Taliban, which I do not possess, unfortunately. So what we need is, of course, political support, financial support, military support, a fraction of what's going to Ukraine, a fraction of what has been invested in the past 20 years. With it, what was going to happen, Bill? Two things will happen. First, the Taliban will realize and recognize and understand that a military victory is not possible. They will come to the table and they will negotiate and talk, which they were going to lose on the table of talking because they have no legitimacy. Second, they're going to lose geography. With a fraction of support, a huge geography of Afghanistan will be liberated. With a role model of a government, the rest of this, the country will rise against them themselves. So it is very easy to actually change the situation in Afghanistan, and what we need is those three things.
A quick follow-up, Mr. Massoud. So one of the arguments I hear about supporting the resistance now is, well, the U.S. spent 20 years in Afghanistan.
Yep.
There were thousands of troops. We gave hundreds of billions of dollars and,
Yep.
All of the weapons. What can the resistance do now that that the Afghan people couldn't have done? What is your response while the U.S. was there for 20 years? What's your response to that?
There is two things. You started the whole conversation with a very good remark in the statement, which was that the Al-Qaeda killed my father just 2 days before 9/11. Why did they did that? Why they did that? Because they knew a coalition between a formidable leader like Ahmad Shah Massoud with the support of United States. It is too much for Al-Qaeda or any other terror network to be able to handle. And Afghanistan will finally see peace and stability and prosperity. And with such leaders, Afghanistan will see a lasting peace and prosperity. So they knew in the presence of Ahmad Shah Massoud and the intervention of United States, it will be another doom of the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. So what they did, they assassinated Ahmad Shah Massoud. They knew afterward, with the country not having such leader, doesn't matter how much support it comes, it is going to be a futile attempt because there is no such leader like Ahmad Shah Massoud. So they were actually very correct about it. And we saw that later, unfortunately, the leader of Afghanistan, they failed the people of Afghanistan. This is something that we take responsibility as well. Afghans also hold responsibility for the current situation. The leaders, the politicians who failed the people with their work, with their disunity, with everything. Now what has changed? Two things changed. First, right now, we learned how precious our land was, how precious our home was, how precious our unity was, how precious everything was, and how we actually took everything for granted. We learned it with our blood, with our bone, with our veins. So that's one thing which I'm sure. And I heard from many politicians and leaders of the past that they said, all we want right now is to die in our country. We don't want to be in the position of power. We don't want to be in the government. We just want to return to our home and die with dignity in our land. So that's one thing we learned from our past. The second thing is there is a new generation.
Mm-hmm.
For example, when the United States left Afghanistan, I'm just one person. I'm an example of millions and many. We didn't leave. Bill, my wife is British. My family, they were living in London. I could easily go and live in the UK. Actually, as a matter of fact, President Macron of France offered me to send an airplane to rescue me. Pakistanis even actually said that we want to rescue you. Even the president of Tajikistan said, I'm going to send a helicopter. I refused all of that because I wanted to stay in my country. And just like that, there were many, many, many more. And as I am speaking, there are many who are in the UK, they are in the US. They're asking me that please find a way for us to go back to Afghanistan. We want to fight. We want to stay for our country. So this new generation is something that we work with the US, we work with the UK, we work with the West, and we learned a lot. We went to universities, we studied a lot. That generation, when it was their time to come, unfortunately, it was the withdrawal happened and the policy and the plans and the strategy changed and everything went to vain. So this is something which I believe what we learned from the past and the new generation is something that will make it different this time. And let's not forget that We have been doing it for the past 3 years, fighting with no help whatsoever. I think we proved it by now that things has changed in Afghanistan this time.
I really quick, Will.
Go ahead.
I agree. I know I could speak for you on this, Will. I think that is one of the biggest mistakes we made is just when this new generation was coming of age, the generation of political and military leaders that can actually affect change, that could get, one of the things I hear from talking to various people from many countries is the problems with the old leaders, the leaders of what we call the Northern Alliance, right? How they failed their country. And I always felt that new generation was up and coming, and that's what we needed to get in power, to get into the highest ranks of the military and the middle management of the military as well, in order to more effectively fight. But go ahead, Will. You take it.
I just wanted to say that I'm in a violent agreement with almost everything you said. I don't think I could find something I didn't agree with. Yeah. I also feel you said earlier in one of your answers that the 15 August was a betrayal. I would agree with you on that. It was a betrayal of the Afghan people as part of U.S. military, the Department of Defense, and the United States government betrayed its Afghan allies, and by abandoning them to the Taliban and al-Qaeda, who were responsible for the 9/11 attacks. And so I don't think it's important to say that. And as American military officer is something that is affecting not only Afghans, but also American military officers who spent their entire careers fighting in Afghanistan. Friends of mine who, like me, spent over 3 years in Afghanistan. It was a betrayal. And, the new generation is something that is just not just the new generation that is in Afghanistan and who I consider behind enemy lines. It's the generation like yourself, sir, Mr. Massoud, that went to Europe, that went to the United States, that trained in American military colleges, who are proud graduates of American military colleges, who learned how to speak English. Yep. English is probably their fifth language. And they went to the United States and successfully completed undergraduate pilot training against some of America's best officers. And I just think that for the National Resistance Front, there is fertile ground because there are a lot of Afghans, not only there who can help with the National Resistance Front, but also in the diaspora by raising awareness of all the issues that are going on in Afghanistan. And so I kind of want to hone in on one of them. You kind of mentioned Afghan girls and the stop of what has been going on there. I think it's safe to say that the Taliban is not going to moderate. I know that was a very popular talking point when I was at the embassy last year. Yeah, they're going to moderate. Well, what do you think about that, Mr. Massoud? How have the Taliban behaved? Because people like Zalmay Khalilzad and Barnett Rubin, who sold the American people on the Doha Agreement, said that the Taliban, they just wanted legitimacy. They just wanted that, and that they would moderate their politics before it. I just wanted to get your reaction. How do you think that's worked out?
Well, I give two answers.
Okay.
The second part is going to be off the record.
Okay.
That's for the sake of our argument. The first part is, of course, I think we gave enough time for the Taliban to show that if they have changed. I think 3 years is enough. More than 3 years. And more than 3 years, it is more than enough for the Taliban to show that they have changed. They are ready for inclusivity. They are accepting women. But not only they did not do that, they broke every single rule in the Charter of the UN. Every single one of them, except one, I think, they broke every single other one. So you see, they not only did not change, but they became more extreme than the 90s. The Taliban of the 90s, they were not this extreme. Well, why? Because one thing happened. The Taliban of the 90s, they were not integrated with the likes of Ansarullah, Al-Qaeda, and other groups. Why? Because they were just some local men, abused by the regional powers to raise against the government of that time. But in the past 20 years, that they were fighting against the United States of America and the West, they were integrated with the other extremist group like Al-Qaeda. And also they have been trained by regional powers by these extreme measures and methods to be used against the NATO and American presence in Afghanistan. So you see, they were actually trained and they were raised by agencies and groups and extremists, and they were integrated. So not only they would not go moderate, that they went extreme, and we were exactly right. It happened. If some people say, oh, there are moderate figures within the Taliban, where are they? Why they cannot speak? Right? So why they cannot speak about it? So this is the thing. I think, first, the 3 years is enough to show that they have not changed. And also their background from the time they were in Pakistan, the time they were in the other countries, the time that they were integrated with the Al-Qaeda and other groups, that the Al-Qaeda and other groups, they actually played an important role in empowering them. Let's not forget that also there is this sort of internal marriage between these groups.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So how do you take that away? There are Al-Qaeda members marrying into these high-rank officials of the Taliban. How do you take those marriages off? It's impossible. It's like mixing like sort of salt in the water. How do you take it away? So that's one thing. And that sort of off-the-record part of it, it was actually the same method and things that they told to Jimmy Carter. That though this Iranian regime, it will change, things will change. It's just sort of the beginning. But did it? It's been more than 40-something years. It's almost 50 years. Did Iranian regime change? Is it moderate? So see, the thing is...
I don't think so.
Some people still say that, but...
Yeah, they do say it though, right? Sure. Yeah, for sure.
This idea that give it time for it to change, sometimes it just doesn't work. And we have clear example in front of us. It does not work.
Yeah, it doesn't work. Yeah. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, we knew this before the Taliban took power. Were those of us who were arguing, the Taliban is not going to change it. It's not going to be the leopard that changes its spots. And we knew it after. It's not going to change. It's never going to change. And Mr. Massoud, you mentioned Al-Qaeda's presence in Afghanistan. And one of the reasons why, look, the reality is the U.S. and countries, they have to be looking after their interests.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I feel it's a dual purpose. We owe the Afghan people, but we also are dependent on the Afghan people to help us fight groups like Al-Qaeda that operate in Afghanistan. The United Nations reported on Al-Qaeda's presence in Afghanistan over the last several years. Training camps, safe houses, religious schools, a media operations center, even a weapons storage depot in the Panjshir province, the home of the National Resistance Front. Is the situation on the ground as bad as the United Nations portrays, or is it worse? And could you tell us anything about what else Al-Qaeda is doing besides what the UN has reported on?
Well, the knowledge that I have, let's not forget that Al-Qaeda became a very sophisticated group. From just being an ideological sort of group with a certain ideology, certain sort of beliefs, and some skills. Past 20 years, their relationship, their expansion from Africa to Middle East and their work in the region, they become a very complex group. So no longer we can just say Al-Qaeda, a very sort of simple group. For example, right now, there are many members of Taliban who are a part of Al-Qaeda. But Al-Qaeda will never publicly say they belong to them. Ansarullah, a terrorist group which is like, or after liberation of Tajikistan, they are part of Al-Qaeda. Mm-hmm. So one thing Al-Qaeda did, and they noticed, that if they go with the name Al-Qaeda, that if they go after sort of liberation of different country with same banner, like Daesh, like the Taliban in the 90s, there will be a regional and international reaction against them. So they learned from this, they got very smart. So what they have done, they localized terrorism and this jihadism. So they created Taliban for Afghanistan, TTP for Pakistan, Ansarullah for Tajikistan, Harakat Islami Uzbekistan, Islamic Movement of Uzbekistan for Uzbekistan. So these groups, all of them, they operate within that range of Al-Qaeda, and they have the same ideology. They're even being monitored and moderated and managed and controlled like that. And they belong to that sphere of sort of ideology. So you see, they become very complex, and now they know. Because before, when it was the Taliban trying to expand, or ISIS even say, it would create a unified reaction against them. But if it is Ansarullah, which says, oh, I'm only after Islamicizing or bringing Sharia to Tajikistan, Uzbekistan will not show any reaction. It says, no, it's just Tajikistan issue. But if it's a united effort to say, no, I'm going to bring liberation and Sharia to both Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, those countries would join hands against them, just the way that it happened in the 90s. So that's one thing happened. The second thing, the Al-Qaeda very rapidly, as soon as they had Afghanistan in their hand, they are creating Afghanistan a breeding ground. This is something which is a public knowledge. It is something which is publicly announced even by the Taliban. Afghanistan have 400 districts. They are creating at least 5 jihadi madrasa in each district, which means by now there are 2,000 jihadi madrasas, which creates hundreds of thousands of jihadi persons and people to be recruited alongside the jihadi madrasas in Pakistan. So you see, the threat that the UN is portraying, it is not close enough to the real threat from Afghanistan. And this is not something that we say, oh, for America to be scared, or for Europe, or for the East or West to come and intervene in Afghanistan. We are saying it because it's genuinely right now happening. And our kids are being sort of created as monsters to be used in the pawn of these groups for expanding their own ideology. And it is a serious threat. You saw what happened in Moscow. You saw what happened in Europe. And you saw that many of these ISIS figures, they got captured and you say before sort of operating any plan. But it's just a matter of time before one of these groups being able to be successful. And let's not forget, this is just different banners, same ideology.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And really quick, Will.
Go ahead.
The madrasas, the religious schools, that's what concerns me the most. You could destroy training camps and weapons, and you could take out key leaders. But I think one of our biggest failings in the global war on terror has been the failure to go after the ideology, to take out clerics who are important, and to allow a permissive environment that Mr. Massoud describes here. So thank you for detailing that, sir. I think that is a really important. The UN reports, I think they said there were madrasa in 5 provinces and training camps in 12. I look at those numbers, I'm like, those are low end numbers. That's why I wanted to ask you that question.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Mr. Massoud, it's now been 3 years, right? Over 3 years. The anti-Taliban resistance is growing.
Yeah.
It needs assistance. It's not an existential threat. Like I say to people, they're not, not challenging for position yet, but you have seen a steady increase in lethality and operational tempo and the ability to attack different targets over the last 3 years. Now we have, the National Resistance Front as the biggest group, most active. There's also the Afghanistan Freedom Front, led by General Yasin Zia, who I'm sure you're familiar with as coming from Takhar. And there's the Afghanistan United Front that hasn't conducted any public operations yet, led by Lieutenant General Sami Sadat. And then there's a bunch of other players as well. Amarilla Saleh's Green Trend. I think I got that right. How is your relationship? How is the NRF's relationship with all of these groups? And do you see a future where they can operate maybe more unified in the coming years? And how do you think that could play out?
Sure. There are a few things. First and foremost, when it happened, when Dr. Yasin Zia started, his campaign, when other friends, I got so happy. Because before that, I felt so lonely. Because
yeah, of course.
It's just that I'm so happy to be the starter of it. When it started, I felt like a very proud mother. When we started everything, it's just like everyone is having the courage. It's a very good thing. Whoever is throwing a stone at the enemy, I kiss that hand. This is my sort of belief. I have nothing bad to say about whoever is standing, either with their heart or with their word or with their hand against the enemy. I'm with them. We tried in the past 3 years to create a unified front. To some extent, we were successful, but at the same time, the world was not ready for such thing.
Right.
They were pushing us in the arms of Taliban. To be very frank and clear, for example, which area or which platform was being delivered to us or allowed for us to use it to gather everyone, because everyone is scattered around the globe, right? If it is like Vienna conference, no country actually funded and supported it. Right. So this is the thing. They ask us why you're not united. We are united. What I say to what General Zia says, or to what Sadat says, or to others, it is the same thing. All right. So what we say is, not me, I'm not claiming Afghanistan for myself. General Zia is not claiming Afghanistan for himself, Sadat or any other. What we are all saying is that Afghanistan belongs to the people. We want to take Afghanistan to the point for the people to decide. If the people decide Afghanistan to be in the hand of a person whose religious is Hindu, very proud, very proud. This is where we want to take it. To that point, we are going all united. At that point, it's the people of Afghanistan to decide what they want for the future. And every group will provide people their own vision. And this is the beauty of democracy. Trump provided a vision, Biden provided a vision, Kamala provided a vision, and then the people of America decided. That's the beauty of democracy. That's what we want. I'm going to provide a vision, which is different to the vision of Sadat, to different of Mr. Dr. Yasin Zia or anybody. It's okay. This is the beauty. And we allow the people to decide. Maybe they like me, maybe they like him, or maybe they like another people. But to that point, we are all united. This is first thing. The second thing is, when we are speaking about, let's say, some people say, oh, there will be civil war and stuff. That is another scare tactic. That is a scare tactic that they use, those groups who are pro-Taliban. That they're like, oh, there will be civil war, these groups are not united, and this and that. Not true at all. We are very much united. You have not heard anything to contradict one another, right? So the goal, the aim, and everything is the same. So you see, the thing is, I don't think oh, they belong to Freedom Front or they belong to this. No. Everyone who is fighting against the Taliban, I feel they belong to me, and I belong to them. This is the belief that we projected. Maybe there's some disagreement here and there, and that's the beauty of every democracy. I'm not a Haybatullah to impose one belief on everyone. And I'm not intending to do so. So we are on the value. We have, I call it a horizontal unity. We have that. We believe in the same values. We believe in the same future for Afghanistan. We are walking toward that direction. And there are different groups, just like the time of Mujahideen. They were very successful against the Soviets. It is, and Charlie Wilson in America, they supported different groups, and they were very successful because Afghanistan geography, ethnic-wise and also geography-wise, it is making it very difficult in the situation that we are at to have a very unified front. It is difficult. But
it is, of course.
To some extent, we are very united.
I think, if you don't mind, Bill, I just want to highlight part of his answer. You know, I get this a lot. Somebody who has talked to and interviewed almost all the resistant groups leaders and I've spent some time there. I get questioned like, why can't they unify? Why can't they just have one? And my response is, are you providing money? Are you providing resources? Are you providing a safe haven? Are you providing anything? So then what are you asking such questions for yet?
Yeah.
When you earlier in the interview, you kind of talked about your vision. I think that it's good one. One of the things that I would add on there, and you can tell me maybe if I'm wrong, is that I think the U.S. government should support the anti-Taliban resistance groups. I think they should provide money and resources. I don't think we should have any boots on the ground. We did that once before. Everybody saw how that ended. It was interesting, and then the ending sucked.
Yeah.
My big point, though, is that we cannot base operations out of Pakistan because I don't want them to have operational control over how the anti-Taliban resistance groups work. Because once they get their claws on it, then they'll twist it. There are other countries in the area that would be better as basing operations. I was wondering, like, if you have any thoughts on where that could be. For me personally, I would pick Tajikistan. But there's other countries around that area that have tenser relations with the Taliban.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
Well, I'm not going to give you my thoughts. I'm going to give you my experience.
Okay.
2001. We were in the exact same situation. There was an attack happening on United States. The United States was ready, to act upon it. And Pakistan had recognized Taliban. It was alongside the Taliban. They needed a base of operation. They needed support. You know where they sent their first groups? Tajikistan. In Tajikistan, they met with the resistant forces, and they worked and they came up with a very compact, very small team, but very sort of a lethal plan. In a span of 3 weeks, most of Afghanistan was liberated. 3 weeks only. This is something I'm going to say, my brother Bill and Will. This time it's going to be in 1 week. Why? The people are ready to torn them apart with their own claws and hands. They hate them this much. Why they are not doing it? Because they feel lonely. Because for the past 3 years, they are hearing that the world is saying, no, we need to recognize Taliban, we need to work with Taliban, we need to be pragmatic. And the people of Afghanistan saw that there is no longer the people and leaders with principle like Reagan and others. At that time, there were people with principle. For example, Churchill, in the face of Nazism, Chamberlain was trying to get along and to cozy up with Hitler. But when Churchill came, he was a man of principle and said no. And that was the beginning of the whole collapse of the Nazis, right? So the people of Afghanistan saw that the regional countries are not fighting the Taliban. Why? Because they are scared that this is going to bring back the NATO, which they see as a bigger threat. And at the same time, it's just geopolitical. At the same time, The West is tired and have fatigue, and they feel like everything they did, it was futile. While they forget that with a very small operational team that went to Tajikistan with the resistance forces, they had coming up with a very smart and very small and compact planning, and they managed to liberate Afghanistan. The people did most of the work. It was just aerial support and very small teams on the ground. Very, very small team. So this experience is there. We don't need to even fantasize it or theorize it. It's experience.
I agree.
So, quick follow-up, though, given the tensions between the United States and Russia over Ukraine and other areas, isn't Tajikistan it's a landlocked country? Isn't it difficult for the U.S. to operate there without support from the Russians? Wouldn't the U.S. need to get support from the Russians to work through Tajikistan?
Well, I think the situation in Ukraine will solve with the new administration. And I think that will have a huge impact in the relationship of the whole region with the United States. And second thing is that I believe situation in Afghanistan is a threat to the region in itself. You saw what happened in Russia. Has that ever happened before? Rarely. It was at least in my memory, it was nothing that serious happened before. So I believe it's in the interest of Russia, like with the cooperation with the United States and the West, to handle the situation in Afghanistan, because currently what they have on their hand, it's a hot pot.
I mean, I think that speaking to the Russian, I think that the Taliban has proved not to be a reliable counterterrorism partner.
Absolutely.
Right. And this idea that, I don't know, I wonder what those Russians in Moscow think about using the Taliban as a counterterrorism option to the Islamic State.
Yeah.
I think it's important, that how often do your fighters come up against Islamic State? How active are they? And do you believe that they are growing as a cancer against the Taliban as well? Because they're also on the battlefield, and while they cooperate at certain points tactically all over the world, they're still fighting in certain areas. So I just wondering what your thoughts on the Islamic State in Afghanistan.
Well, it's not false that the Daesh and ISIS they exist in Afghanistan. But there are two groups or two types of IS in Afghanistan. The first part, which is the majority, it is the group that are completely aligned with Taliban. For example, in Kunduz. In Kunduz, my information and intel, it shows that some IS members, they are in complete cooperation and integration with the Taliban members. They go to their houses. They have been taken by the Taliban from one place to another, and they're being supported. In other cases, for example, in southeast of Afghanistan, we are hearing these clashes between the Taliban. And these clashes are the clashes of power, not ideology. Because let's not forget that the Taliban and ISIS, they are two sides of the same coin, which is Islamic extremism.
Right.
So for a Taliban foot soldier to see one of their comrades by different name is going for liberation of, let's say, Tajikistan or somewhere else, it brings them nothing but joy. Because for past 20 years, they have been preached this jihad and jihad and jihad and jihad. So the leadership of Taliban, they might, some of them, be smart enough not to align themselves with IS. However, the majority of their entity, they see Talib's IS sort of mentality aligned with themselves, and they see it as sort of as a hope that they have had before as well. Expansion of jihad, liberating the whole world, expanding Sharia, and all of that.
Bill, do you have any other questions?
Yes, I do. And this is I'm going to look back a couple of years, Mr. Massoud. The Taliban take over Kabul in August of 2015. Yep. You begin to organize the National Resistance Front. And then I believe it was at the beginning of September, the Taliban move on Panjshir, which is the last province to stand up to the Taliban. I believe it took somewhere around 10 days for the Taliban to conquer Panjshir. Given, you were watching what was happening, you were preparing and organizing, how was the Taliban able to conquer Panjshir so quickly? This was one of the things I was watching, obviously, from a distance, but it was very confusing to me to understand how the Taliban was able to pull that off, just given the geographical nature of Panjshir and the number of forces that had organized there. People like Amrullah Saleh, he brought security forces, and there were others that came to both Panjshir and Andarab district as well. So can you just give us a little bit of what happened there in the final days of the Afghan Republic?
Sure. On 15th of August, when Kabul collapsed, we went to Panjshir. And Panjshir collapsed on the 6th of September. So you see, it's almost 3 weeks, or more than 3 weeks, that we would stand against the Taliban. How it happened, 3 things happened. First, Panjshir, from a military stronghold of Ahmad Shah Massoud, past 20 years, if you visit it, it actually transformed into a tourist destination.
Yep.
It's interesting.
It sure did.
Yeah. So you saw that there was no tanks or barricades or anything. People were coming and going. So we actually transformed, which was a big mistake, by the way. We shouldn't have done that, and the leaders shouldn't have done that. But actually, it was a tourist destination. First, sometimes when they think of Panjshir, they remember the time of the Soviets. It was a different era. Panjshir transformed in the past 20 years. We had the roads, we had the coffee shops, we had restaurants, and people were coming and going and all of that.
Brought to you by the Panjshir Provincial Reconstruction Team. Yeah, I mean, they did for 20 years.
Absolutely.
Panjshir got some of the best, they got some of the best roads. That makes sense.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah. And also, let's not forget that for the past 20 years, Panjshir was always in the green provinces. So it was always safe. The minimum security equipment was provided to it because it was green. It was safe.
And it was beautiful, and it's beautiful too. And all the American soldiers wanted to go there and get and hang out because you could walk around, and it was, you weren't going to get shot at.
It was absolutely safe. It was absolutely safe, right? That was first thing. The second big mistake, it was actually, which was, of course, at that time, it was the right decision. It was the process of DDR, right?
Yes.
So what
disarmament, demobilization, reintegration that happened in the early 2000s. Yes.
In the early 2000s.
DDR programs. Yes, sir.
The DDR program, what it did, it actually took the guns from the hand of the people who were at that time ready to defend. So we accepted it. And if you saw the footage of trucks after trucks from Panjshir, we sent our equipments because we believed in this process, which America brought to us. We believed, we really give into it. Maybe it was a mistake, maybe it was the truth, but we did. We trusted it, right? And the last thing, there was some misinformation. Not me, not Mr. Saleh. We did not bring any security forces to Panjshir. The whole forces that we had in Panjshir, it was less than 1,000 people. First. Second, we fought with less than 1,000 people against 35,000 Taliban alongside TTP, alongside Ansar Allah, alongside Al-Qaeda, and alongside foreign fighters. We have evidence. I want Mr. Nazari to provide the video that you see that Arab fighters, Al-Qaeda fighters, is speaking Arabic, They are loading at the back of the truck, and they're saying we are going to liberate Panjshir.
I can confirm that. I saw that video. We wrote an article about that at Long War Journal. Yeah, we detected that, and you are correct. The Taliban threw the kitchen sink at Panjshir.
Did they have any Pakistani ISI agents with them to provide command and control? I wouldn't be surprised. That's why I asked.
I heard reports, but I never got confirmation.
Well, this is the thing. We also have sort of reports, and we have people who saw it with their own eyes. But the thing is to confirm it. This is something that we needed. For example, in the time of my father, we captured them. We had their sort of ISI like documentation. So if they didn't in the 90s, why not this time? Right?
Absolutely.
So this is something that it's just like sort of common sense. However, we have evidence of Tajik fighters, Uzbek fighters, Arab fighters. We have video evidence of it, all of them presence in Panjshir. And also I have video evidence and footage of Pakistani citizens in Panjshir fighting alongside the Taliban. I have evidence of that. If they were like Pakistan's army member or like ISI, I don't know, because we don't have the confirmation. But their citizenship, we are 100% sure of that. So the other thing is 35,000 extremist forces fighting against one valley with no connection whatsoever. And this is just one stronghold. If I would create it out of metal, it would not last. Because where was that support? We lasted 3 weeks. And we ran out of the ammunition we really needed. It was the RPG shells. It was the assault rifle ammunition. And it was the sort of the PKs and the sort of machine guns. So these three important tools or this sort of ammunition, we ran out. I remember, let me give you one example. The people of Andarab, they came to me and they said, we are fighting, we liberated some provinces, the Taliban take back, we are in really need of ammunition. I gave them money and I said, go and buy ammunition and continue resistance and do not allow them to pass a certain area. They throw it back the money. They said, we don't need the money, we need ammunition. And I was like, where can I get it? I don't have it. So this is the thing. We lost. We didn't actually lose. Still, we are in the mountains, even to this day, in the mountains. We just retreated, just like my father, to the mountains. They just took the valley. The thing is, we retreated to the mountains for the lack of equipment, for the lack of logistics. Because,
sorry, go ahead.
Because one thing, let's not forget. I remember I spoke to some people in the American embassy, some people in the Ministry of Defense of the United States at that time, before the collapse, that Afghanistan going to collapse. Please, we need to do something about it. They told me, go to the government. And I went to the government, and the government told me this: we are not going to support you in the face of the Taliban. Very clear. And even the Mr. Siraj, the head of the NDS, if you ask him, he told me that Mr. Ashraf Ghani was willing for Afghanistan to fall in the hand of Taliban than to allow the likes of me to be able to stand against it. It is another aspect that the likes of Ghani is single-handedly, sort of responsible for the collapse of Afghanistan from the Afghan side. He destroyed everything. He doesn't believe in resistance.
Can I have a little comment here, Bill?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So not too long ago, there was a Lieutenant Colonel Will Shelper who was at the U.S. Embassy serving as the air attaché. And I will just say that Mr. Massoud's story checks out. And I will just leave it at that. That whole thing is accurate. And Mr. Massoud and his colleagues did repeatedly tell the U.S. government that the government was going to fall, that the security forces weren't going to hold, that they were hollowed out, that they were below 50% in some places, that corruption had eaten away at some of it, and that, it was a problem. And it's also important to realize that not only did Panjshir have all the best roads and all that stuff, is that unlike, during the Soviet Union and during the Taliban times, the Taliban this time had all of America's equipment.
Absolutely.
So, right, you were fighting people with Humvees, you had fighting people that had bulletproof, they had M4s, they had everything because it was wide open.
Absolutely.
And so the forces, have retreated into the mountains and now are conducting the, phase 1 of guerrilla operations.
Yeah.
What are your goals for the upcoming year? What does 2025 look like for the NRF?
Well, we are ready for both scenarios. The first scenario is the world will continue as it is. With the minimal support that we have, I will continue this path. Because one thing is that I cannot give in to the will of someone who is telling my daughter you cannot go to school and study. I cannot give in to the will of someone who tells me I'm inferior. I cannot give in to the will of someone who says that I have permission from the divine power to rule over you. I cannot. One thing I love more than anything, more than my daughter, which she's my everything, I love actually my country more than my daughter. But there's one thing I love more than even my country, and that's freedom. I cannot give in to the people which is after my freedom. I cannot. So I will continue this path, even if I'm one person. I will not give my blessing. I will not give the legitimacy. I will not give in to the will of Taliban. They repeatedly approached me, by the way. They gave me the position of being their foreign minister. They said, come and work in our government. You are not corrupt. You are not this and that. Why you're fighting against us? I said, very well, I will do that, but under one condition. Your government should represent the people of Afghanistan and should come through the will of the people of Afghanistan. Let's agree to that. If the people decide for you, Talib, to be the ruler of this country, then very well. Why not? I will happily accept it. And they said, no, this is against Islam. So you see, I cannot accept such things. So even if I'm one person, as long as they do not allow people to decide and freedom to truly get rooted in Afghanistan, I will continue this path. Which is going to be very difficult. It's going to take very long time. But I know I'm on the right side of the history. Doesn't matter what's going to happen to me or what is the end. Second scenario. The world understand that they cannot ignore a pain on one side of it. We have a great poet, by the way. His name is Sadi. He has a beautiful poem. The poem is like this. بنی آدم اعضای یکدیگرند که در آفرینش زیک گوهرند. چو عضوی به درد آورد او روزگار دیگر عضوها را نماند قرار. Which means which means humankind are made of one body. They are like one body. They cannot ignore each other. If one part of this body is hurt, the whole body feels the pain. So this is the thing that I believe they cannot continue ignoring the dire situation that Afghanistan and Afghan people are in. So therefore, there will be help to the people of Afghanistan, and we will do the job. Oh, we will do it so good, and we will do it so right that it will surprise the whole world. Because I know my people, and that's why I'm standing. And I know them so much that with a slight of support and push, they are going to change a lot of things. And we are going to have a beautiful podcast like this in Afghanistan.
Inshallah.
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 Inshallah, indeed. Mr. Massoud, first, on the specific point, thank you for laying that
Absolutely.
out. Absolutely. Panjshir. That was the first explanation that actually made sense to me. I had not thought about, how Panjshir became a tourist destination, the building of roads, the DDR process, which I was aware of all of these things, but never put that together. And that how, of course I understand the Taliban, coming at you militarily. I knew that they were throwing everything at you. I watched that happen. So I really do appreciate that. But more importantly, Mr. Massoud, thank you for your devotion to freedom, for your country. It's inspiring. And thank you for your time and your commitment to the Taliban.
No worries. Can I add one
absolutely.
Please go ahead.
For example, one thing in Panjshir, I was like, let's repeat what my father did. I gathered all my commanders. They were like, what my father did, how he stopped. He said, well, we had a lot of mines. We really put a lot of, digged a lot of mines from the 2 points that we knew the Taliban are coming. I said, well, let's do that. He said, well, sir, we don't have mine. I said, what? Why don't you have it? He said, well, we signed something like 10 years ago that never to use mine. I said, okay, then can you make it from these shells and everything we have? They said, yes, we can, but we don't have engineers, because also in the army, we didn't have such capability. We had engineers to diffuse it, but not actually to make it. So it's another point is that we had in no way the capability to actually stop the convoys that was coming and these sorts of groups that was coming. And even with that, we managed to defend for 3 weeks until we ran out of ammunition. We ran out of everything. And also to answer one thing, that how you're alive. You went to Panjshir to die. How come you're alive? On the 3rd and 4th of September, my people came every day, and from 20th to 22nd, 23rd, till the last day, they were coming to me like, we need ammunition. The story I told you of the people of Andrab, ammunition. Finally, a group of commanders, they came and they were like, we don't care how, we don't care when and how. Just go and find us ammunition. Go to Tajikistan, talk to the president. Go somewhere else and talk to somebody else. To find help, I left. In the absence of me, unfortunately, Panjshir fell. I just went to find bread for my soldiers and bullets for their guns. And my absence had fallen, and I just left to get the support. And this is something that to this day, it just makes it very hard for me to even sleep at night, because I never had the intention to leave my people behind. I never had the intention to leave my friends in the mountains, because when I went to Panjshir, I knew very vividly and clearly that we are all alone. Because before that, as Willis spoke, we spoke a lot, and I really went everywhere to get the help.
You did.
And I knew it's not coming. So when I went to Panjshir, I knew exactly where I am, and that there is no help whatsoever. And I went just to die, because I wanted to die with dignity in my country. But maybe the God had different plan for us to be here, for us to see the liberation of Panjshir in Afghanistan one day.
Yes. Before you joined the call, we were talking to Mr. Ali Naziri of the National Resistance Front. And Will said, we were just, bantering back and forth. And Will said, just don't listen to the Americans. And boy, you should not have listened to us about the DDR and should not have turned over those weapons. In retrospect, it's just so obvious.
All DDR did was take away weapons from people that were part of the Northern Alliance. I wasn't part of it. I've read about it. And a lot of the Afghan peace and reintegration program, which was another one.
Yeah.
A lot of it was just former commanders from different groups, and there wasn't a lot of Taliban.
Yeah, unfortunately, this is something that sometimes we learn from history. So
yes,
this is unfortunately that was a mistake.
Bill, I just want you to know it always hurts when they start naming off all the programs that I remember, and I'm like, I remember that, the DDR, the APRP. Oh, some of my greatest hits. It was a real stinker.
Yeah, absolutely, Mr. Massoud, you have an opportunity to make history with the National Resistance Front and working with the other groups.
Thank you so much. I'm just trying to do the right thing.
You certainly are. You are doing the right thing.
Yes, you are.
Will started off, by apologizing for decisions that he didn't make and didn't agree with. And it's hard for guys like Will and I to, we shouldn't have to apologize for a government for decisions we didn't approve.
Can I interrupt 1 second, Bill? Is that?
Yeah, sure.
Let me say something from the bottom of my heart. I had a great interview with a great friend, Sean Ryan, a great guy. He said, well, allow me to apologize on behalf of American people. And I quickly interrupted and I said, you guys have nothing to apologize for. And once again, Bill, well, you too, and American people and those veterans who served in Afghanistan. I'm also, myself, I come from a military family. I know where we stand and those things that we never go somewhere with just for the sake of money or something. We go somewhere to do something right? So you have absolutely nothing to apologize for. And the people of America have absolutely nothing to apologize for. They're a great nation, great people, and I admire them. One thing is that there are politicians which unfortunately sometimes they forget, if you do not stand for something, if you are not standing for principle, then you're standing for nothing, right? That's why I really admire the likes of Reagan. You see, someone with a charisma and a principle, like it changes a lot of things. Right? So it broke down the wall of Berlin. It just single-handedly defeated the Soviets and did a lot of great things. Why? Because he stood for principle, right? So this is the thing. I believe, unfortunately, we were unfortunate to live in a time that our leaders were men with no principle. Let's just leave it at that. The people of America and those great people who served in Afghanistan have nothing to apologize for. We are in this field that we have to say.
And I was saying that in that you have nothing to apologize for as well. You left your country to try to gather support. You being there when it fell or not, you're here today to work for a future for your country. Thank you so much for joining us today, Mr. Massoud.
Thank you very much.
It's a real honor and pleasure.
It's an absolute pleasure. You guys take care of yourself. God bless you all. And I hope to see you very soon in Afghanistan.
Amen.
Yes, sir.
I'll be there.
Bless your family, the Afghan people to aspire, again, to be free. We wish you all the best.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone, for listening to today's episode of Generation Jihad. Just a reminder, you can listen to us on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you listen to podcasts.